Good morning, fellas, and welcome to the watch list. Today is my number 4 on my watch list out of 5 total. A couple weeks ago you saw Brad's number 4 was The Mandalorian. Here in a couple more weeks you'll see our number 5s. But number 4 on my watch list is American Horror Story. American Horror Story isn't a show that I started watching while it was airing on TV, but me and my wife began to binge it afterwards. We would sit down and we would watch each season on Netflix as they were released. American Horror Story is classified as an American anthology horror TV series. It was created by Ryan Murphy and Brad Falchuk, or Falchuk? I don't know. I don't do names. And they created it for the FX cable network. Usually with an anthology series, each episode is its own story. But with American Horror Story, each season is its own story. Now later on in the show you see there's a little bit of crossover between seasons. But at the beginning, each season is its own story. From beginning to middle to end, everything is self-contained in each season. Some events throughout the series are based on real-world events that have actually occurred, or based on real people that have actually existed. And although it is an anthology series with different stories for each season, a lot of the actors and actresses return throughout the show. Evan Peters has been in 9 out of 10 seasons. Sarah Paulson has been in 9 out of 10 seasons, and Lily Rabe has been in 9 out of 10 seasons. Some of the other actors and actresses have been in 6 or 7 of the seasons, but those 3 have really been in the majority of the seasons. The first episode of the first season aired on October 5th, 2011, and the last episode of the most recent season aired on November 13th, 2019. Which means at this point it's been over a year since we've gotten any new American Horror Story content, and I'm fiending for more. There have been 9 seasons released so far, and there's a 10th season that's in production now. They've already announced some of the cast, but they haven't really released any of the story details or anything just yet. So let's break down each season just a little bit without giving too many details away. Season 1 originally didn't have a title, and then after they decided to name Season 2 Asylum, they went back and they named Season 1 Murder House. And Murder House follows the Harmon family as they move to a new house that just happens to be haunted by everybody who's ever lived there, and anybody who has died on the property. The main characters of Season 1 are Dr. Ben Harmon, Vivian Harmon, his wife, Violet Harmon, their daughter, Constance Langdon, the neighbor that lives next door, and Tate Langdon, Constance's son. Throughout the story of Season 1, we learn what happened to the people that used to live in the house, and we follow the story of what is going on in Ben and Vivian's marriage. And as the season goes on, you really get a feeling of what American Horror Story is going to be. Moving on to Season 2, Asylum. Asylum is set in 1964 at Briarcliff Manor, a mental institution. The story follows Kit Walker, who is accused of being a serial killer known as Bloodyface. They say that he killed his wife, but he claims that she was actually abducted by aliens. There's several mental patients in the asylum that claim to have been abducted by aliens, and they claim that they are innocent, and there's just a lot of stuff going on in this asylum. Another major character in this season is Lana Winters. She's a journalist that's trying to get a story from Kit Walker. She thinks that this could be her big break into a bigger stage as a journalist. Another main character is Oliver Thredson. He is the psychiatrist that is assigned to the asylum. He has taken a special interest in Kit Walker and his case as a whole. Other characters like Sister Jude, who's in charge of the asylum, and Sister Mary Eunice, which is basically Sister Jude's underling, they provide a lot of the story, a lot of the moving forward of the story, and there's several supporting characters that help the whole story along. Can't really say a whole lot about Season 2 without giving a bunch of spoilers away. Season 3 is Coven. This is the one that all the basic love. It's about witches It is about sisterhood. It's a crazy season. Coven is set in 2020, although it aired in 2013, and it takes place in New Orleans at a girls-only boarding school. The story follows a group of witches led by Cordelia Fox. She's the headmistress of the school, and all of the girls at the school are discovered to be descendants of the witches from the Salem witch trials, the witches that survived. There's Zoe. She's a young new witch. She's just now finding out about her powers after she had an accident that resulted in her boyfriend's death. Madison Montgomery, she's a movie star and a total bitch. She is just easily hateable. You just want to see her get hurt or die or something. And there's Queenie. She's a human voodoo doll. Anything that she does to herself happens to the person that she's looking at. So if she were to stab herself or something, then the person who she's staring at would feel the stab wound. And then there's Nan. She's a mind reader. And then of course Fiona Good, the supreme, the most powerful witch of her generation. The story of the Coven focuses around finding the next supreme of this new generation, because Fiona Good's power is leaving her, which is the sign that the new supreme is rising. Moving on to season 4, Freak Show. Freak Show is set in 1952 in Jupiter, Florida. The story follows a traveling freak show led by Elsa Mars. She's trying to continue the tradition of freak shows, and she needs to find a place to keep all of her family, her monsters, in a safe space. And the best place for them to be is to be taken advantage of in a freak show. Because this is the 50s and people are starting to watch TV more often, not going to sideshow attractions so much, but she's trying to keep the old business afloat. The freaks include Jimmy Darling, the little lobster boy with the lobster claws for hands. It also includes Del Toledo, the strong man, his wife, I can't remember her name, but she's got 3 boobs. Some pinheads, they call them pinheads. I don't think that's a politically correct term, but they call them pinheads. And new to the freak show, Bet and Dot Tatler. They are conjoined twins. Basically looks like one woman with 2 heads. Their story is that they're joining the freak show to make some money to get the surgery to separate them. So they're not going to be conjoined twins anymore. They're going to be 2 separate people. Also in this season is Dandy. He is a spoiled brat that just tries to get whatever he wants, and it just leads him down a really dark path. And of course, Twisty the Clown. Twisty the Clown is the reason that my wife would not watch this season with me. She is terrified of clowns, and Twisty the Clown is one of the creepiest clowns I've ever seen. He's got a dirty outfit and just disturbing face paint, and he wears a little mask. And when he takes off his mask, you can see what's under the mask, and you'd rather him just wear the mask. But he's a homicidal maniac. Season 5 is Hotel, set in 2015, which is real time. This season aired in 2015, at the Hotel Cortez in downtown Los Angeles. The story follows Detective John Lowe as he's investigating a series of murders that are based on the 10 Commandments. His investigation leads him to this hotel where unexplained things are happening, which enters in the Countess Elizabeth Johnson, played by Lady Gaga. Turns out she's a vampire. There's just vampires now. And she's like super old. Like the guy who built the hotel back in the 1920s or something. James Patrick March is actually her husband, and he's been dead for a while. And she is his widow. And sometime after his death, she fell in love with a vampire, and she was transformed into a vampire. The story bounces back and forth from the Countess's vampirism to John Lowe's marriage to John Lowe's detective work looking into this case with the 10 Commandments murders. And it's a wild ride. Season 6 is called Roanoke. This story is set between the years of 2014 to 2016 and is set in a North Carolina farmhouse. This farmhouse just so happens to be located right on top of the location where the Roanoke colony just disappeared in the 1580s. This season is really confusing. So here's the deal. In 2014, Shelby Miller, Matt Miller, and Matt's sister Lee Harris lived in a farmhouse in North Carolina. And they had just the worst time. They just had a terrible time at this house. All kinds of weird happening and just bad things. To the point that it became national media, like national news about this, which led to a producer approaching them about starting up a TV show based on their experiences. And this TV show is called My Roanoke Nightmare. So in 2015, Shelby Miller, Matt Miller, and Lee Harris are stars of this docu-series about their time at the Roanoke Nightmare House. The show, My Roanoke Nightmare, has actors to recreate the experiences of Shelby Miller, Matt Miller, and Lee Harris, along with all the other characters that were involved at the time. So they had Audrey Tyndall playing Shelby Miller, they had Dominic Banks playing Matt Miller, they had Monet, with a last name that I can't say, but I'm going to try, Tumusimi, maybe. She played Lee Harris, and Agnes Mary Winstead played the Butcher, which is the leader of the Roanoke colony that was harassing Shelby Miller, Matt Miller, and Lee Harris while they were living in the Roanoke house. So after My Roanoke Nightmare was such a huge success, the producer decided to offer the three original people, Shelby Miller, Matt Miller, and Lee Harris, the opportunity to go back to the Roanoke house. And then he also offered the actors that played Shelby, Matt, and Lee to go back to the Roanoke house. And they could just live there together for 3 days during the blood moon. This was called 3 Days in Hell. And during this time, everything just went really bad. Just really, really terrible. And you gotta watch it to see it. But this whole season was super confusing because I couldn't find out who was Shelby and who was Audrey and who was Matt and who was Dominic, and it was just a mess. Moving on then to season 7, Cult. Cult is set in 2017, which was real time as it was released in 2017, and is based in Michigan, some made-up town in Michigan. And the story behind Cult is a strange topic to talk about here on TSAN because we don't talk about politics, but Cult was all about politics. Cult was 100% about the election of Donald Trump as president and how the different characters of this little Michigan town handled that. So we had Allie Mayfair Richards. She is a little baker, she has a wife, they have a son, and she has a lot wrong with her. She's got a lot of phobias, she's got a lot of anxiety issues. She sees a psychiatrist named Dr. Rudy Vincent, and she just has a lot wrong with her. And the election results are affecting her psyche to the point that she's experiencing her phobias more extremely. And she feels like everybody is just out to get her. On the other side of the spectrum, Kai Anderson, he sees the results of the election as a win. He is extremely happy, and he sees it as an opportunity for himself to get into politics. So he runs for city council. Small spoiler alert, he wins. And he uses this power to start up a cult, basically. He sees how easy it is to get people to follow what he wants to do, so he just manipulates people to do exactly what he wants to do. Season 8, Apocalypse. Apocalypse is set in the near future, sometime after 2020, because Coven was set in 2020, and some of the events of Coven have to have transpired before Apocalypse could have happened, although this season aired in 2018. To set up this season, you have to know that nuclear warfare has happened. Nukes have dropped, people are dead, select few people are living in bunkers underground, just waiting out the nuclear radiation. The main setting is in Outpost 3. Outpost 3 is ran by a character named Ms. Venable. She's just a prude, snobby, very better than you kind of person. She wants everybody to wear formal gowns and formal dress all the time. It's like every day in Outpost 3 is like a fancy dinner party. At her right hand side is Miriam Mead, who's a robot. So she has a robot helping her run this outpost, in charge of all these people that are supposed to be surviving the apocalypse and repopulating the world. And the number one character that's important in season 8 might be a bit of a spoiler, I don't know. His name is Michael Langdon. He is the Antichrist. He engineered the apocalypse. He pulled the strings. He just pushed all the right buttons to make the nukes fall, to restart the world. And everything happened in just the right order to work out. This season sees a crossover from season 1, Murder House, for a little bit of the backstory, and season 3, Coven. You see the witches in this season. Throughout the story of Apocalypse, you find out that Outpost 3 used to be a boys-only warlock school that Michael Langdon was a part of. That might be a bit too spoilery, but I feel like that's important information to give out. Moving on to season 9, 1984. This season is obviously set in 1984 at a camp called Camp Redwood, just outside of Los Angeles. The story follows Brooke Thompson. She's a teenager, young adult, somewhere in there, maybe her 20s, and several other camp counselors that she met. And they go off to Camp Redwood, which is a camp that has been closed down for 14 years. It has been closed down since 1970 because there were a series of grisly murders that happened in one night, carried out by a man that went by Mr. Jingles. The only surviving person of these murders was named Margaret Booth. And years later, she decided to buy Camp Redwood. She decided to open it again as a way to move on with her life and to bring happiness back in the world, to make that place remembered for something other than the murders. So they reopen the camp, all the camp counselors come. Before the kids start showing up for summer camp, Mr. Jingles gets out of the psych ward, goes back to the camp, and murders begin happening again. As of now, 9 seasons is what we got. The 10th season, I'm really looking forward to it myself. I know my wife is. We're ready for something new to watch. I think my favorite season overall is Apocalypse. There just seems to be like so much backstory and interconnected, interweaved pieces that it flows really well, and it seems like every little second of Apocalypse is like a new plot twist, and that's not something you get with like Freak Show. Freak Show's a weird season. I couldn't really get into it. And Roanoke was just so confusing. I like the story of Roanoke, but it's too confusing for me. I'm a simple guy. And Hotel had vampires. Even in the context of a horror story where you're talking about ghosts and demons and the Antichrist, I just can't get behind vampires at all. So my favorite is Apocalypse. I just like how it was weaved together in the end. If I had to pick a second favorite, it would probably be Cult, for the same reason. It's like every minute of the series adds a new plot twist, just something changes and something wraps up, and it doesn't really wrap up, it just loops back on itself. And then by the end of the season, you're like, oh, that's what was happening, okay. Didn't catch that. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of, oh, aha moments with American Horror Story. And I think that's what makes it such a good show. This show has won several awards. Critics seem to love it. Academies seem to love it. They just keep giving the actors and actresses awards. They keep giving the screenwriters awards. And it's just a great show. It's been going on for 9 seasons, about to start its 10th. But that's all I got for you. This was number 4 on my watch list, American Horror Story. Check back in a couple weeks for number 5. But until then, we still got TSAN Tuesdays every Tuesday, TSAN Saturday nights, where we go live every Saturday night, 5 o'clock, between 5 and 6. Be sure to check back every Tuesday for a new video from the Spoiler Alert Network on TSAN Tuesdays. Make sure to follow us on Facebook, like this video, comment on this video, tell us more stuff you want to see. Tell me what you think about American Horror Story. Tell me what your favorite season or episode is. Tell me who your favorite character is, who your favorite actor. I really like Evan Peters. I'm not a huge fan of Jessica Lange. I'm not a huge fan of Sarah Paulson. But Evan Peters, I really like him. There's a reason why he's in so many seasons. But that's what I got for you today. Come back and see us next Tuesday. Until then, stay dedicated.